Part 1. I didn't know the room existed. I didn't find the hidden door until my father died. It was a week after the funeral, and the house was quiet, too quiet. My mother was asleep upstairs, finally getting rest after days of being surrounded by casseroles and condolences. I couldn't sleep. The living room still smelled like my dad, cedar and dust and that brand of aftershave he'd worn for as long as I could remember. I was moving some of his books, classics, mostly untouched, when one of the shelves tilted slightly forward. At first, I thought I'd broken something. But then I saw the outline. A narrow seam behind the shelf, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. My hands moved before my brain caught up. I pulled. And the bookshelf slid away, revealing a thin, wooden door. No handle. Just a small brass keyhole. I stood there, frozen. We'd lived in that house for over 25 years. Through childhood, adolescence, college visits, and holidays. And not once had anyone ever mentioned the hidden room. The strange part? I wasn't surprised. Something about my father always felt unfinished. Like he was holding his breath behind every conversation. I didn't find the key that night. But I knew one thing for certain. That room wasn't meant for me. But now, I couldn't look away from it. Part 2, the key was in her jewelry box. The next morning, I couldn't stop thinking about the door. I went through the motions, coffee, soft footsteps around the kitchen, helping Mom with the condolence cards, but my thoughts stayed anchored to that quiet seam behind the bookshelf. It felt like something unfinished was watching me from it. Later that afternoon, while Mom napped upstairs, I went into her room. Not to snoop, not at first. But something inside me whispered that she might know about the door. That she might have been keeping the same secret, or worse, protecting it. Her vanity was still perfectly arranged. Jewelry box at the center, old, floral, lacquered, untouched since I was a kid. I opened it. Inside were the usual things, a tangle of earrings, a broken watch, a locket I remembered her wearing on my 8th grade graduation. But beneath the tray, hidden in the velvet lining, was a key. Small. Brass. Ornate. Too old to belong to anything ordinary. I held it in my hand and just stared for a long time. There was a tightness in my chest I couldn't name. Excitement? Fear? Betrayal? I wasn't sure. But I knew I was going to use it. That night, when the house was dark and still, I returned to the shelf. Slid it back. The door was there. Waiting. I slipped the key into the lock. It turned smoothly. The door creaked open. The air was stale, untouched. Dust motes floated through the sliver of light behind me. Inside was a small room, maybe 10 by 10. No windows. Just a chair, a desk, and a wooden filing cabinet. A single lamp sat on the desk. I flipped it on. It buzzed but worked. The first thing I noticed was the photo on the desk. It was of my father, younger, maybe in his 30s. Standing beside him was a woman who wasn't my mother. She was laughing, hand on his chest, forehead resting against his. And they looked like they belonged to each other. There was a note attached to the photo. For M. In another life, we could have told him the truth. My breath caught. Him. I searched the drawers. In the bottom one was a folder, worn thin from years of being opened and closed. Inside, letters. Dozens. Every one of them addressed to a single name. To my son. My name. Part 3, Letters from a Stranger Who Knew Me. I sat in that hidden room for over an hour, staring at the stack of letters addressed to me, letters I had never seen, from a woman I had never met. But she knew me. The first one began. You were 5 when I wrote this. You had a toy firetruck you wouldn't sleep without, and you called the moon your nightlight friend. I don't know if I'll ever get to read this to you, but I'm writing anyway. Because I need you to know who I am. There was no signature. Just M. The same M from the photo. The same M from the note. The woman who had written dozens of letters to me, and had never sent a single one. I kept reading. The letters spanned years. Some short. Some long. One from when I was 7. Your dad says you're learning the piano. I imagine your fingers are still too small to reach all the keys, but knowing you, you'll keep trying. You always kept trying. Even as a baby, you never cried when you fell. You just looked up like the world owed you an explanation. Another, when I was 10. You asked your father once why you didn't look like your cousins. He brushed it off. But I felt it. I felt the ache through the walls we'd built between us. And then one from when I was 13. If you're reading this now, it means he broke his promise. That line stopped me. He broke his promise. The man I called Dad, the man we buried just a week ago, had been hiding her. Not just the room. Not just the letters. Her. I didn't know if she was alive. Or where she was. Or why he had kept her out of my life. But the weight of her words pressed against every memory I'd ever had of him. The late night talks. The, I love you, buddy, before basketball practice. The way he used to squeeze my shoulder like it meant something final and true. Was it all real? Or just a performance? I took one letter, the last one in the pile, and slid it into my pocket. Then I locked the door. Put the bookshelf back. And went to bed knowing everything I believed about my childhood might be a carefully constructed lie. The next morning, over coffee, I looked at my mom across the table. Her hands were wrapped around her mug like she was holding something back. So I asked her. Who's M? She didn't blink. Didn't flinch. She just said. I was wondering when you'd find that room. Part 4, the woman my mother couldn't be. Her voice was calm when she said it. But her eyes weren't. They flickered, just for a moment, like someone standing too close to a flame. I knew about the room, she said. Her fingers tapped lightly on the ceramic mug. He built it before you were born. I didn't say anything. I was afraid if I did, I'd explode. Or worse, beg. Who is M? I asked again. She didn't look away. She was, part of his life before me. Before me? She nodded. Yes. And during. The silence between us stretched like a tightrope. Then she inhaled deeply, like she'd been holding something in for decades. Her name was Mira. I let it settle. The name that had written to me, loved me from a distance, haunted a secret door, Mira. Was she in love with him? He was in love with her. I felt something crack. I don't understand. You married him. I did, she said. After she left. After he thought he could live without her. I stared. So you were the second choice? No, she said. I was the safe choice. The honesty in her voice cut deeper than any denial would have. She stood and walked to the sink, staring out the window. She got pregnant when she was 23. Your father didn't know what to do. He was terrified. And selfish. He wanted to keep her, but not the complication. I swallowed. The complication, was me. She turned around slowly. Her expression wasn't cruel. It was tired. No, she said. You were the only thing that made any of it worth it. She walked past me, then paused. He asked her to give you up. Said they'd come back to it later. That he needed time to get things in order. She left town with you when you were 2 months old. My chest felt hollow. Then why am I here? I asked. With you? Because she brought you back, she said quietly. 2 years later. Out of nowhere. She gave me up. I whispered. No. She gave him a second chance. She thought he'd become the man you deserved. I could barely speak. And then? She stayed for a while. Lived nearby. Visited. But they argued constantly. He didn't want to make their relationship public. Didn't want the judgment. Said you needed stability, not scandal. And you? I asked. I was in love with him, she said. I had been for years. I stood there, heart pounding. So how did you end up with me? She turned toward me. He asked her to leave. Again. She refused. So he told her she could be part of your life, but only in secret. No claim. No rights. No confusion. And she agreed? No, my mother said, voice shaking. She left. For good. I backed away, the room spinning. So you raised me. Knowing she was out there. I raised you like you were mine, she said. But I wasn't. You were. Her voice cracked. Not really, I said, stepping back again. I was just, convenient. Don't you dare, she whispered. I didn't steal you. I fought for you. I was the one who stayed. We didn't speak for the rest of the day. But the truth didn't go away. It echoed. And all I could hear was the sound of someone else's name. Mira. Part 5, the return address I shouldn't have found. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Myra's handwriting. I heard her voice, even though I didn't know what it sounded like. I imagined a woman watching from the shadows of my life, present in every birthday, every scraped knee, every school play she was never allowed to attend. And I hated that I never even knew to look for her. The next morning, I went back to the hidden room. This time, I wasn't just reading. I was searching. Digging. At the back of the bottom drawer, beneath a layer of old paper and dust, I found it. A small envelope. No letter. No contents. Just a return address. Mira L. Brennan. 93, Thistle Avenue. Briar Hollow, New York. The handwriting was faded, but unmistakably hers. It was postmarked 15 years ago. I stared at it for a long time, my hands trembling. This wasn't a ghost. This wasn't history. This was someone still alive. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the envelope in front of me. My mother entered, saw it, and froze. You're going to find her, she said. I have to. She nodded slowly. You think she'll want to see you? I don't know, I said. But I need to ask. She looked at me for a long time. She'll love you, she whispered. She always did. I left the next morning without telling anyone else. I didn't pack much, just enough for a couple of days. The drive took hours, but I barely noticed. I was running on adrenaline, memory, and the heavy silence of what I was about to uncover. Briar Hollow was small, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone. It didn't take long to find the house. A white cottage with blue shutters. Ivy curling around the porch. Wind chimes whispering in the breeze. I got out of the car and stood there. I had no plan. No idea what I would say. Hi, I think you might be my mother. I found the letters you weren't allowed to send. Why did you leave me behind? None of them felt right. But before I could knock, the door opened. And there she was. Older. Thinner than I expected. Gray in her hair. But the eyes were the same as mine. She blinked. Once. Twice. Then whispered, like she wasn't sure she was awake. Michael. My full name. A name only 3 people had ever used. I nodded. Yes. Her hand came to her mouth. She stepped back, clutching the doorframe. I didn't think you'd ever. I found the room, I said. The letters. She looked like she might collapse. I stepped forward. I think we need to talk. Part 6, The Truth She Carried Alone. She made tea. It was the kind of thing people did when the world was too heavy, defaulting to rituals, to movement, to something their hands could do while their hearts unraveled. I sat at her kitchen table, staring at the floral wallpaper, the faded framed photos of places I didn't recognize. There were no pictures of children. No family. Nothing to suggest she had ever been a mother. But she had. She placed the mug in front of me, her hands shaking slightly. Then sat down across from me and took a breath so deep I could hear it rattle in her chest. I thought your father burned the letters, she said. He didn't. He hid them. She closed her eyes. Of course he did. Her voice was soft, brittle at the edges, but there was a quiet strength underneath. The kind of strength that comes from learning to keep living when the world tells you to disappear. She didn't ask how I found her. She didn't ask what I wanted. She just said, I owe you the truth. All of it. And she told me. How she met my father when she was 22. How they were never supposed to fall in love. He was already seeing someone, my mother. But Mira didn't know that. Not at first. By the time she did, it was too late. She was pregnant. He panicked. Made promises. Said he'd leave. Said he'd raise me. But as months passed, things changed. He grew distant. Silent. Then finally said I would complicate everything. She left. Not because she wanted to, but because she thought it would force him to want us back. 2 years later, she brought me home. Gave him a second chance. And he took it. But only on his terms. He told me I could see you, she said. But I couldn't be your mother. Not openly. He said it would confuse you. I gritted my teeth. I would have figured it out. She smiled, bittersweet. You did. I asked her why she didn't fight harder. Why she didn't try to take me back. Her eyes welled up. But she didn't cry. Because every time I tried to make a claim, he reminded me that I'd left. That I'd walked away. And the court saw him as stable, married, successful. But he wasn't the better parent. No, she said. But he was the louder one. I asked her the question I'd been holding for days. Do you regret it? She looked straight at me. No, she said. Because I got to see you grow up. Even from a distance. I knew your birthday every year. I knew when you learned to ride a bike. I knew your school. Your sports teams. I was always there. Where? I asked. In the crowd, she said softly. Always in the crowd. That broke me. I pressed my hands to my face. Couldn't stop the tears. All those times I thought I saw a familiar figure at my games. The woman who clapped too hard. The woman who left too quickly. She was there. She never left me. She just wasn't allowed to stay. She reached across the table and rested her hand over mine. I wasn't perfect, she said. But I never stopped being your mother. And I believed her. For the first time, truly, I believed her. Part 7, A New Picture on the Mantle. I stayed 2 nights. Not because we planned it, but because leaving felt impossible. She made pancakes the next morning. Burned them a little. Apologized with a smile like she used to do it every day of my childhood. We sat on her back porch, watching the wind move through trees that had stood guard over her house for decades. She told me stories. Ones about herself. Not about my father. Not about grief. But about the woman she used to be. The girl who loved music. The one who backpacked through Europe with a journal full of poems. The one who painted watercolors and never showed anyone. I stopped painting when I left you, she said. It felt dishonest. We didn't speak much about my other mother, the one who raised me. But when we did, Mira didn't speak with bitterness. Only restraint. She loved you, she said once. I know that. She may have made it harder for me, but she loved you. That was the closest she ever came to forgiving her. And maybe the closest she could. When I returned home, everything felt heavier. The air. The rooms. The weight of too many mothers and not enough answers. My mom, the one who had stayed, didn't ask how it went. She just looked at me with those tired, complicated eyes and said, "You look like someone who knows who he is." I didn't answer. Because I wasn't sure I did. A few days later, I brought home a framed photo. One Mira had given me before I left. It was of her holding me, maybe a few weeks old. She was younger than I am now, hair falling into her face, laughing like the world hadn't touched her yet. I placed it on the mantel beside all the others. My mother saw it. She didn't ask questions. She just walked over, stared at it for a long time, then said, "She looks like you." "No," I said. "I look like her." Sarah came home that evening and saw the new addition. She didn't say much. Just came over, wrapped her arms around me, and said, "I'm glad you found her." So was I. But what I didn't tell her, what I wasn't ready to say out loud, was that it felt like I had lost something else in the process. Not just innocence. But the version of my family that was simple, solid, safe. It was gone now. Replaced by truth. And truth, as I had learned, doesn't care if it fits your life. Part 8, The Life I Didn't Know I Lived. The truth didn't bring peace all at once. It came slowly, like the tide. One wave at a time. Some days, I still felt angry, at my father, for keeping her from me. At my mother, for going along with it. At Mira, for ever leaving in the first place, no matter how good her reasons. But more than that. I felt grief. Grief for a version of myself I would never get to be. The boy who grew up with 2 women at his games. The teenager who didn't have to wonder why he never quite fit in his own skin. The man who didn't have to read love letters locked behind a secret door. One Saturday morning, months later, I took Sarah with me to visit Mira again. She was nervous. So was I. But when they met, something between them clicked, not like friendship, not right away, but like understanding. Women who had both loved the same child. Later that afternoon, Mira gave me a box. Not letters this time. But memories. A pair of tiny shoes. A rattle. Photos I'd never seen, me asleep in her lap, me wrapped in a blue blanket, me holding her finger with a grip that said don't let go. She'd kept them all. Across decades. Across distance. "Do you want to keep them?" she asked. I shook my head. "No. I want you to." When we left, I looked back at her house from the car. And I felt something strange, not sorrow, not longing. Belonging. Like I had roots that stretched farther than I knew. Like there were parts of me planted in places I had never visited until now. That night, Sarah asked me if I ever wished I could go back. To the version of my life where I didn't know. Where Mira was a stranger. Where everything was simpler. I thought about it. Then I said, I don't want simpler. I want true. Months passed. Renee called every week. My mom, the one who raised me, never spoke ill of her again. One day, she even said, "I'm glad you found her." That was the closest we came to healing. But it was enough. On my next birthday, I received 2 cards. One signed, "Love, Mom." The other signed, "Love, always, M. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel torn between them. Because both were true. Because I wasn't split in two. I was whole.